The draft proposed by Bahrain, if adopted, could set a dangerous precedent in both international and maritime law. It was unbalanced, featuring one-sided anti-Iranian language, and failing to address the root cause of the tensions in the Gulf, namely, the aggression by the United States and Israel against Iran. Russia welcomes the agreement on the cessation of hostilities between the United States and Iran. From the very beginning of the devastating war in the Middle East, ignited by the American-Israeli alliance, Russia has consistently advocated for a ceasefire and the resumption of political and diplomatic efforts to resolve the conflict. We have persistently worked in this direction, including through our efforts at the UN Security Council, maintaining close coordination with other responsible members of the international community. Of particular note is Islamabad's positive role as a mediator, which deserves special recognition. Serious negotiations remain necessary to reach a final settlement based on respect for legitimate rights and the interests of all states in the region. We believe that such a resolution should guarantee that these military crises do not recur. I would like to emphasize that this conflict was man-made and unprovoked. Long-term peace and security in the region must be secured, and we will continue to actively contribute to the realization of these goals. The FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization document, particularly emphasizes the pivotal role of the Persian Gulf countries within the global energy system. It highlights that these nations are a major production hub, supplying nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers, primarily urea, which accounts for 30% of global supplies, as well as over 20% of ammonia. Additionally, the region holds 44% of the world's sulfur reserves, a vital component in fertilizer production. In this context, it is clear that the ongoing conflict in the Middle East and the restrictions on navigation through the Strait of Hormuz have disrupted the supply of essential raw materials. Thanks to the sufficiently accumulated global grain reserves, the sharp rise in grain prices has so far been contained. In this regard, the aforementioned organizations state that it is still too early to speak of an imminent global food crisis, although all the trends are certainly deeply concerning. Ukraine is one of the world's leading countries in black market transplant and human trafficking. Children, of course, are among the most vulnerable in this regard. Not only children, but orphans in particular, who often become the very parcels sent abroad under the guise of humanitarian aid, for their own good, as they claim. Afterward, the traces of these children are often lost. There is another issue that is being quietly ignored by official representatives of the Kiev regime: the harassment of Russian-speaking children. On the 6th of April, Ukrainian education expert Ivana Kobernik stated that about 40,000 children have been displaced. Just imagine that figure: 40,000 children from eastern Ukraine who do not attend schools in western Ukraine because they face ridicule and insults. This is not a childish spat. It is a direct consequence of the policy of linguistic terror carried out by adults in Ukraine. Russian-speaking children are viewed by the Kiev regime as expendable as adults, chased in people-stealing vehicles, tied to poles, beaten simply for asking for medicines in Russian, or for specifying the time in their native language. In Ukraine, adults are prepared to be used as cannon fodder, while minors are exploited primarily for propaganda purposes. Yet, they are subjected to more brutal physical and psychological treatment than adults, perhaps even more so. Relying on its status as a leading space power that fully guarantees sovereignty in launch activities, Russia is successfully developing constructive cooperation with all interested participants in space endeavors, and is convinced that the upcoming Russian Space Forum on the 9th of April, organized for the first time as part of Space Week in the Russian Federation from 6th to the 12th of April, has already commenced. As a foreign ministry, we are actively engaged in it and believe it will help inject additional momentum into the process of establishing mutually beneficial collaborations in the peaceful exploration of space with all interested partners. Space is not merely about technology disconnected from everyday life, nor about technology for its own sake. It is about our future. Russia advocates for space to remain a realm of cooperation, not conflict. There should be no exclusive clubs, no divisions into us and them. That is simply not our approach. In the context of illegal, unilateral, and illegitimate restrictions, sanctions, or the so-called sanctions trade war waged by the West, our country remains a responsible participant in the global, particularly the energy, market. It fully fulfills its contractual obligations in the interest of maintaining global energy security, as well as in the interest of citizens who rely on energy resources simply as consumers. As for what the video hosting service you mentioned did to the leading Belarusian media, by a single click, it destroyed access to information sources familiar to 1 million viewers, along with long-term archival records. I believe this can only be described as vile information sabotage, an act of aggressive political censorship. We can continue this list. It's barbaric, the barbarism of the 21st century, which they try to justify with incomprehensible, unfounded pretexts, citing illegitimate sanctions or the fight against some unreliable content. Perhaps they will start with themselves one day, regarding the supposed joint efforts by Russian and Iranian hackers, as you put it. That is another lie, this time propagated by the Kiev regime and its associated groups. And the irony is that those making such claims are, in fact, the very entities conducting a large-scale malicious cyber campaign against Russia, both through Ukrainian special services and controlled criminal cyber groups. The relevant authorities in Serbia are currently investigating the incident. We will, of course, share our conclusions publicly once the relevant findings have been published. We are closely monitoring the actions taken by the Serbian authorities and are taking appropriate steps ourselves. I would also like to emphasize that, as we have repeatedly pointed out in briefings, targeted attacks on energy infrastructure facilities have become something of a signature tactic of the Kiev regime.